Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hearth. Today, we're going to be talking about the principles that Ray Castellino really brought together from all his work with working with families as well as with groups of adults. And these principles, some of them may be familiar to you from different modalities that you work with or from different traditions that you're familiar with. But that was one of his ways of offering to us a way to really be with what arises and the learnings that we have and how to really make space and have healthy relationships with the people we are with. So I want to open that up to see if there's anything that the two of you also want to share about that.
Well, I'll follow by saying, just as you said, these principles are principles for healthy relationships. And I find that, as you said, things arise in life, both implicit somatic memories or imprints or early woundings, and also just the way that human beings, we have ways that we bump into each other sometimes. So if we remember the principles, centrally mutual support and cooperation, then we can navigate back to resonance with each other and back to harmony. And yeah, I work with these principles daily in my life.
And I would like to add that by just the list of principles, whenever I've presented them or mentioned them, they change the vibration, the feeling of the space. Just by mentioning them and knowing them, you can create a safe container when whatever you're doing. You don't have to be doing a process group, but often just naming that these principles were created to help create more connection, more depth, more possibility when we're working, especially with groups. And just naming them, it changes the way people feel in the space. And so the whole space changes. So I really recommend that people practice and listening to them and get a chance to name them in their next small group.
Yeah, I'm loving what you're saying, Kate. Just sometimes naming them and invoking them can be very powerful just in and of themselves. And it makes me remember with Ray, he would say, when family systems can actually use these principles in their daily interactions, that really was an indicator of how healthy those relationships were within the families. And as much as some of these emerged in his family work, they also emerged as he started working with groups of adults. And they really inform a lot of his work. And I think also, like you said, Eileen, people who have gone through those trainings, how much it supports us in our daily lives, in work, in our families, and in life in general. Yeah. So who wants to start with the first one? I think you started to talk about it a little bit, Eileen. Do you want to?
I can, well, I always like to start with welcome.
Yeah, me too.
So welcome, as we say in this work, welcome. I can't do it without the hand gesture. So for me, welcome is something that I can say to somebody, but it's also an energy of welcoming, and even the shape of the womb is welcoming. The community, family, the parents welcoming each of us, one of us in as we're being conceived, as we're gestating in our mother, as we are born, to have that welcome. That it's just a fundamental human need to feel welcomed. So to welcome someone else and to feel welcomed by others.
Love the gesture, because there's something about receiving welcome is a receiving of someone. And so I really love the gesture of that.
I like the ways we talk about it sometimes as a conception right. You have a need, but also a right. You have a right to feel welcome here at the Hearth, on planet Earth, in your lives. So, conception right.
Yeah. And when I talk about welcome, sometimes I really like to emphasize all of someone is welcome, meaning everything that comes along with them, all their gifts, as well as all their challenges and flaws. So that's really important for someone to feel, not just the embrace or the welcome, but that all parts of them, all those rough edges, and all the beauty and the talents and gifts that they have as well. Yeah.
The beautiful thing to end on. Let's do the next principle of mutual support and cooperation.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to keep going with that? Or Kate, do you want to?
Well, when I talk about mutual support and cooperation, I will often just say Ray found that this was a basic way that human groups connect and operate. And he said it's the optimal ways that human groups connect and operate, and that we are all in relationship. No one else is more important than another, and that we have our connection here. And even though while one of us might be speaking, the whole group is important. I wouldn't be speaking if it wasn't for the whole group. And so everybody is important in this group, and we are supporting each other to not at an expense of our own. This is what we really want to be here and do. And I think I'll stop there and let somebody else add.
What?
I can add that in families, mutual support and cooperation is both for the parents and the children. Even the baby can cooperate. Even the baby can be in mutuality. So we hold this principle in this connected way of parenting that we support in this work, really holding that paradigm that, again, I'm gesturing the welcome, but in this, the container of the family field, all members are in mutual support and cooperation of each other.
Yeah. And, Ray studied a long time regarding Adler's principles, Alfred Adler. And one of the things that Alfred Adler would do was he measured someone's health with their, I think, based on their capacity or ability to cooperate. So there was something that really influenced Ray in tracking of like how well can people cooperate and how can he support mutual support and cooperation in the interactions with the families and with the adults that he worked with. So even though it wasn't the first principle he added, it was something that in the beginning where all the principles that he sort of brought together were in the effort of, or in the support of, the principle of mutual support and cooperation. So, yeah.
Often when I'm doing circles and I mention this principle, I take a moment and I thank those who are supporting people that are in the circle. And I'll send out another ring of gratitude to those people that are supporting, just as a double layer of mutual support and cooperation. Those who are caring for our children or watering our plants or walking our pets or taking up the space behind us. So I find that's very orienting and deepening.
Yeah. And I'm going to just add one last piece. Is there's something I think you're reminding me of a little bit is one thing where I used to also say is when we find ourselves in conflict or challenges with another, if we could just remember the intention to be in mutual support and cooperation, how much that can actually shift the energy around what feels like a conflict or a challenge. Right.
I think we can move on to the next principle of choice.
Yeah.
I think this is one of my most favorite principles. I think it can help someone really orient to what's possible. Just really realizing that everyone always has the possibility of saying no when we are doing things together. You have our permission to always say no. And often we find behind a no is a yes, and often parents, families, children, and even people, it can feel just quite powered over. So giving people a chance as a principal in the work that we do, you can say no. And that can be very liberating for someone to really try on in this space.
And not only just the option to say no, but to support the no's that arise. And like you said, Kate, that often we need to say no before we can find our yes. And it could be a short no, a very, temporary, or it could be like a very definitive, like, no, no way. Not right now. Yeah.
I'm really enjoying, Kristin, what you just said about supporting other people's choice. As I've really begun to embody this work, one of the things I notice is that how fast my mind wants to go into my agendas or what I want. And so as I've really embodied this work and the relational field, a healthy relational field, part of it is really making space for other people's choice, other people's impulse, and to be able to really listen to that and support that. So I really appreciated you saying that, Kristin. The other thing I want to say is that in family work, one of the things I really enjoy doing is to teach parents how can they both be the leader of the family, the alpha of the family, as well as allowing for a child's impulse, for a child's choice. And sometimes those feel contradictory in old, outdated modes of parenting, but it's actually quite possible to have both and to really support the healthy development of a child's sense of their own impulse and their own choice.
Great. Next one. Yeah. Where do we want to go from here?
Pause.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go to.
Yeah. You want to go?
Well, the principle of the pause, and I like calling it the principle of co-regulation. There's something about how do we go at a pace that works for us, that is integratable, and where we know that we need just a little bit more space to be with what actually arises, to integrate. It could be a celebration as much as it could be something that's really hard. But can we take a pause to really be with, soak in, receive something that is there? Again, whether it's a happy, thrilling, uplifting emotion or something that's really hard or heartbreaking or sad or even just anxious or whatever it is. So we really, with this principle, support people to move at a pace that works. And Ray used to always say, move at a pace that is at the for the youngest person in the room, meaning the little ones in us that need just a little bit more time to be with what arises. And when someone takes that pause, that it not only supports them, but it probably supports other people in the room as well. And me taking my pause can actually also support the field as a whole. And like we said before, mutual support and cooperation, there's something that my experience is that it encourages and supports the relationship, supports the connection between me and what's arising, as well as me and the other people who are in the room that might be different than it was back in the history.
I often, when I'm describing this to people, I use the picture of a moving train. You know, when the train is going by you fast and you just see a blur of train parts and letters going past you. But when the train stops, then you're able to see all parts of it. And so for me, the pause is an opportunity to actually feel what is happening here and to be able to feel it and to even describe it and to be able to work together with somebody else where both people are taking pauses as they need to. Like you said, it's both a way to down-regulate, to become more regulated together with another person, but it can also be a way to feel love or something that's very resourcing, to actually be able to feel it in your body and really have that be on a somatic level, a support for us in our day-to-day challenges and to just have more resilience in life.
And I also like to call pauses for beauty, things to savor. When someone says something authentic and it just washes over me in such a good way, I like to take my time with it. So I call pauses for beauty also.
Yeah, we have phrases in our lexicon of like, stop and smell the roses. Take a moment and breathe in the fresh air. Feel that we're here or that we're safe or that we're okay. And it does give us a little bit more space to just, as you said, Eileen, realize what's there externally, internally. Yeah, and I appreciate it.
I'm even enjoying the pause that's happening naturally right now.
Yeah, slowing down.
So shall we do brief and frequent eye contact?
Sure.
So I can start. Eye contact is a way. I started immediately looking around as if there was a circle of people around me. So as we are in a group, there is a natural way that when I feel in connection with somebody, when I feel at ease, that I'm going to just glance at them from time to time and just see that they're there, feel that they're there, and let them know I'm with them. And so in our work, we invite brief and frequent eye contact in groups and families to just create the group field and to support being present with each other.
Yeah, and I think it's so important in our culture, which can be very isolating at times, or there's so much about doing things on our own or being efficient about it. And so there is something, like you said, Eileen, of remembering that we might not actually be alone right now with our thoughts or our feelings. Even literally just remembering that there's another parent or another person in the room with you. And there's something about the principle of brief, frequent eye contact is when we do it with the intention for mutual support and cooperation, it really can like release the hormone, the feel-good hormone of oxytocin. And yeah, I'm looking at both of you just now. And there's, as people might be watching this, you can see the immediate smiles when that happens. And that's really important to just sort of remember, oh, someone else might be with us. Looks like you're going to say something, Kate.
Yeah, I was going to say it can really help shift the feeling in the space, allowing people to just feel the flush of that oxytocin that you're talking about. Kristin, I also talk about it with parents, like when they bring their baby and we're all hovering over the baby and there's 3 pairs of eyes. Sometimes I just invite the parents to make a little eye contact, and it can give a little space to the baby, allowing the baby just to down-regulate a little bit. And when children come and families come, to let have the parents make connection, it can just help the overall feeling for the child and for the work that we're doing. So it creates wider space, but also stronger and deeper.
Yeah, and there were studies back in, I think, in the 70s, which basically found that in the school systems, when kids in classrooms actually started making eye contact with each other, they learned better, they behaved more, they were able to pay attention to what was actually happening in the classroom. And so I'm just wanting to name for those who are watching, just when it's really different being in person with a group, but there's something about being on screens that we can really find ourselves staring at the screen, partially because of, I know from my own upbringing and relationship with screens, I usually am looking at a screen and just sitting back and watching it. And how do we interact live with other people who are on screens? And so there's something that Ray used to do when he moved into online womb surrounds, of just doing brief, frequent eye contact by a slow hand gesture across the screen.
And that's just letting the other people know that I see you.
Yeah. And then doing it in return is like, okay, I see you too. Next
You're
principle.
ready to move on to negotiated contact and attention? Well, in this principle, we often, when we're doing a small groups and we're doing it live, we will demonstrate it. And you can do it on Zoom as well. But really helping people get that when we're working and people are dropping into their own experience, sometimes it's really respectful of the system that you're with to ask permission to make contact. And I like to demonstrate this and to show how it is to get closer to someone, and then make, prepare that person, negotiate with them where they would like contact, make the contact, and then, state that we're going to move our contact away, and then keep our attention right there still. And when I work with babies and also my own experience of this principle is that I can feel the contact of the gaze of someone. I can feel it in my body when I'm in my baby self, and just to have that attention, sometimes the attention can hurt. So I ask people just to take a moment, step back, and then it's also such a vital connection for babies with their eyes and their face to name when they're going to look away. Is there anything you two might want to add?
Yeah, I want to actually just support what you're saying, Kate, by saying that both physical contact, how close, how far we are to somebody, and also how we place our attention, how close or far we place it. Each person has a way that they prefer close contact or further out. So it's really a personal preference for each person. And so when we're coming into contact with somebody else, then we want to find out, what do they prefer? And it can be both something that we feel, and it can also be something that we ask. Oh, I'm sitting down here. Do you have enough space? Or there's just subtle ways we can check in with somebody. And then also sometimes attention. Some people have like really to be in close and really have a more intimate way with attention. And then there's some people who like to be really far away and maybe even like to be at the back of the room and keep their attention back. And so it's for us to discover, when we're in connection, how do we like it? And then when we're exploring our woundings, when we're exploring early material that might have been difficult, then we that might change. And actually it might change every interaction. So it's really great to just start to listen when you're with somebody else, or notice, what do I feel about, how do I place myself with this person? And I might even ask, because it could be different from time to time.
Yeah, there's something of inviting our own awareness of where we may be, where our attention is, and also finding the sweet spot of where it might be for someone else. And that can change actually moment to moment, depending on what might be arising, or it could change depending on who. So it's not always the same, even among two of the same people, like two different interactions. It could be very different from time to time. So finding the sweet spot, communicating and asking questions or making statements and seeing what the response is before we might make contact, and what that looks like for each person and what we do with our attention.
I just want to add that in our culture, we're really talking about consent more. And just as we were speaking about choice, in really negotiating physical contact and attention with somebody, we want to be really supportive of somebody else's comfort. So it's not only about what is it that I need, but then also to be really supportive of somebody else's sweet spot. So it's not something that we're doing alone, that there's actually that principle of mutual support and cooperation that is really there at the center of how to negotiate contact and attention.
Yeah, and you bringing that up reminds me of where this really comes from with working with young ones, with babies, is because so often there were things that were done to them when they were, as babies, that there wasn't consent given. There wasn't, and in some ways, whether they can verbalize it or not, they have responses. And how do we start to include people in and little ones in the conversation as things are happening? So, anything else there?
We'll move on to the next principle,
Okay.
principle of self-care. This is one of my also favorite principles to talk about with families, especially. But it is just as it sounds, like this is a part of where if you need to lie down, if you need to rest, if you need to go get a drink of water or use the bathroom, that's all something that is, I mean, please, it's one of our principles. And to have people really get that they can actually rest in the space that if they need that, and that really helping people understand, especially parents, that their self-care will ripple out into the family. So really encouraging parents to care for themselves and have the children see that's an important value.
As you're saying that, there's something that's coming up in terms of that's part of also the principle of welcome. There's how do we give space for people to be exactly where they are, and that might mean them having to rest because they're tired or they're hungry, and how do we actually consciously bring that into our space and interactions with each other? Yeah. Bodily needs are necessary to take care of.
Kristin, I've really enjoyed, I've heard you talk about self-care and connection. And what a lot of us learned from our families is the way that you do self-care is that you have to go away alone somewhere and separate from other people in order to do self-care. And I really love that in our work and in the group fields that we create together, that I can be in the space and take care of myself. I can just take some time and be quiet or sit back or take a nap or eat or stretch. And I don't have to go do it alone somewhere, but I can really stay in connection with the group and take care of myself in the ways that I need to.
Which reminds me, part of the whole thing about naming as self-care and connection is that the importance or the reason why we need to take self-care or do self-care is so that we can be more present with what arises. And that might seem like at odds with each other. Oh, how is me sleeping helping me be more present? But there's something of trusting that as people take care of themselves, that there is something that's being supported in the field, either a repair from the history or how it might make me more refreshed later on and be more present at a different time. And that includes when we're working with families, if someone actually does need more space and need to go take care of something for themselves, that if we can remember of doing it in connection, that giving space for them to do that. And the intention is so that we can be back into connection once I've gone on a run or taken a walk or some fresh air, but so that I can come back and then be in connection with what is happening between us. So, yeah.
Feels complete there.
Great.
And so the final principle is confidentiality. Either of you like to talk about that one?
I can start with that. I mean, pretty much principle of confidentiality, a lot of people understand the whole meaning behind confidentiality. Where it comes from really is with little ones, again, how many times do we see parents with a new baby, and then you want to talk about, oh, how was it? How did the birth go, or what's happening? And meanwhile, what Ray would say is that he would see the baby start to squawk or start to move around. And so how do we start to include and realize that, to ask permission to talk about something that actually is their history or their story? And so how, as a field or as we are interacting with people, hold the confidentiality of what is their story, and then ask permission if we want to reference it in any ways, and include people in giving them, choice, taking a pause to acknowledge that we might be referencing something, and how is that okay with someone else, in a lot of different ways, and in any kind of interaction we have.
What comes to mind when I hear you say all that, Kristin, is that what I say to people when I'm running process groups or anything, that if you hear something that is meaningful to you and to someone maybe in your life, that you just ask permission to repeat it. Most people are very willing to have their story shared if they think it's going to make a difference. But just ask permission.
Yeah.
I think that for me, when I think of the principle of confidentiality, it's about trust and safety. So knowing that other people in the family or in the group are going to hold my story and my experiences with respect and confidentiality, it really helps me feel safe to be able to settle into the group and to be able to share my experiences, and to know that the vulnerability that sharing my own story is being respected and regarded by other members of the group.
Great. That's all the principles.
Yeah, that's the principles. Okay.
It looks
Thanks.
like you want to say one more thing, Eileen.
I wanted to say one more thing. So as we were saying in the beginning, these principles work together. They are actually very holographic, and they all interact with each other. And yeah, and hope that supports you to bring those into your life.